So for this video, I have decided to try out a new thing and use these headphones, and I think it will be clearer and there won't be any issues with the audio as you listen to it. So the purpose of this video is to piggyback off of another video that I will release before this video, and that video was MAGA without repentance. And I didn't really explain in that video what I mean by that title. And that title is a double entendre because first it is Make America Great Again Without Repentance, basically saying, can you make America great again without repentance? And then also MAGA as a MAGA movement. And as those who have watched the video, and that video will be before this video, will see is that we need to be very careful with our estimation of the MAGA movement and where we think that's going to lead us. And so this video is picking up from those ideas to discuss some other things that I've noticed that kind of tie in. So, unless you're living under a rock, I think most of the viewers are aware of what Trump has been doing and the alacrity with which he's been doing that. And that comes to dismantling the deep state. Now, to be clear, the deep state is an issue. We saw that during Trump's first administration, where people undermined him. We had even articles of people in the deep state, or the bureaucracy, that's really what it is, talking about how they were taking steps to undermine him, which is crazy because the president really should have full authority and control over the executive branch, which is the regulations, administrative agencies, and so forth. And those are the ones that are undermining him. And so we saw that. We saw that with COVID. So there's definitely this, and we're seeing it now as well, as we have unraveled and uncovered what has been going on. We see a very extensive network of corruption, of politicians, of programs, certain agendas being money being funneled to those people or institutions without much oversight. And it appears it's just been kickbacks. And it appears that even Chelsea Clinton's wedding was paid for funds from USAID. USAID. So, anyways, the whole point of that is there certainly is a problem, and there are more. There are more issues than just U.S. aid, but this goes much further, and you can even see this. There are some examples. So I remember um, one example was, this might be relevant, but I'll share it anyways. Is basically showing the extent of corruption, and this isn't just necessarily in the federal government, but even in state governments. But Zuckerberg did this whole grant or funding for schools. I think it was New Jersey, to pioneer charter schools and so forth, and gave tons of money. And that money has just been lost. No idea where it is. And so that tends to happen in state governments and in federal government. And we're starting to see more of that. And so, given that we see this corruption, and given that we are upset with it, and rightly so, because our taxpayer dollars are going to fund things that we don't approve and that are a waste. The issue is what do we do to address it? And is what Trump is doing, is that the right approach? And I want to give my take, because I think really what the point of this video is that we probably should pump the brakes a little bit, because we are in the process of trying to remove the corruption. We are violating constitutional principles of separation of powers. And we are also giving the other side more ammunition to use when they're back in power. And that's the real crux of the matter, is that whatever principle we abandon, the other side will do it as well. And this is going to be kind of, I guess, a race to annihilation, because each side is going to get more aggressive, get more risky with the honoring and adherence to the Constitution, to norms. They're going to test those more, and it's just going to further erode the the norms that have held society. So that's one thing, is you're going to have both sides just going at it. And let's talk about that thing first, and then we'll go to the next thing. Oh, actually, let me say it. Let's say forget, because I'm doing this off the top of my head. But there's the eroding of trust, but then there's also eroding of the frameworks that we have established that have kept our society safe, and um, and has caused us to be insulated from a lot of challenges, so to speak. So when it comes to eroding the trust, that's a big thing. So, and it's not necessarily black or white. So there are people who are really upset about this whole U.S. aid and what Elon Musk is doing. From what I've read in my research, it doesn't seem like what Elon Musk is doing with U.S. aid is illegal and against the rule of law, because U.S. aid is money allocated for foreign affairs, foreign donations, and that has a very different place in the Constitution versus funding for domestic programs under the Commerce Clause of the Constitution. So when it comes to U.S. aid, cutting that, or what Elon Musk is doing, and what Elon Musk is doing is just a consultant, and he's just going to the president saying, "Hey, this is what we found. You should cut it." And the president's allowed to have consultants, from as far as I'm aware, and he's allowed to cut money to U.S. aid because it is a foreign program, even though it was passed by Congress. Congress cannot dictate to the president, who has plenary control over foreign affairs, what the president's to do in foreign affairs. Right? That is, it's been widely accepted among both Jefferson and either Marshall or Hamilton, who were at odds. They both agreed that the executive should have full control, the president should have full control over foreign affairs, and that makes sense because you have to be more flexible and so forth. And they imagine Congress to be more deliberative. And so when it comes to foreign affairs, that really is within the president's aegis, and he can decide what he wants to do and how he wants to do it. So when it comes to U.S. aid, that cutting is not unconstitutional, and it's a lot of it is should be cut. But there is, and I say a lot because I want to kind of put a pin in that and get back to that idea, because it kind of goes back to the idea of eroding our values, or eroding the system. So that's one thing, USA. But now the Trump administration is starting to go towards domestic programs, which is the Department of Education and the Treasury and so forth. And people have criticized that as violating the rule of law. And I think they're right, because the president doesn't just get to go in to a domestic program that's been appropriated funds by Congress under the authority under the Commerce Clause. That's how it's been interpreted in the Constitution, and just say, don't spend anymore. Um, my understanding is the president has the obligation to spend the money that Congress has appropriated. He doesn't get to say, no, you can't, I'm not going to do that. Otherwise, he's basically stopping Congress. And so, why I bring that up is that whatever Trump is doing in this regard, the other side, Democrats, are going to do the same thing. And just as Trump is pushing the boundaries, and he has reasons for doing so and trying to remove this corruption, it's going to come back and bite us in the butt. Because just as we're trying to cut, or where the Trump administration, conservatives want to get rid of the Department of Education for legitimate reasons, the Democrats are going to try to do the same thing. And you never know in what ways, but there could be spending for farmers, and I think even Trump's cutting that. and that goes to my other point. But there could be funding for farmers or even grants for religious institutions that they'll try to cut or remove the tax exempt status for religious nonprofits. And we can say, well, they can't do that. There's a code that's established. Well, who enforces it? The IRS, and IRS is under the executive. And just as Trump is going through and controlling what the executive does, the next president could do that. Now, some would say, well, that's illegal. Yeah, it is, but then it had to be challenged in the courts. And who knows, in 4 years, 8 years, 10 years from now, 12, what the makeup of the court will be. And it could change. And I'm not saying that all these things are going to come immediately back the next term. I don't know what's going to happen. It could be a period of this prosperity for 4, 8 years, a decade. I don't know. But eventually the tables are going to turn. And other Democrats, liberals, progressives will get in power. They'll have their court, and they'll be able to do the same thing that Trump's doing right now. And so it will be really hard for us to hold the principle when we don't do the same. So I just basically is just saying, if you're supporting a full gutting of everything, I would be cautious, and that's just my view. Is I think we should do it in a more a slower way, a way that's legal, a way that adheres to the principles and the Constitution has been interpreted by the Supreme Court, and not try to rock the boat too much because it's just going to come back. And we're, I think, in a world of hurt, and eventually um, they'll come after our prized institutions, and they'll come after anything that stands in the way of their um, anti-racist policies, and they will come with a sledgehammer just as we're doing to them. And they're pretty upset about it. And I know, I mean, I'm pretty sure that's what will happen one way or another. Exactly how, that's, I don't know, but it will. So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing is this cutting of spending and funding. Um, we also need to be very cautious here because what we're essentially doing, it's like Jenga blocks, maybe like we're just removing pieces, but we're starting to remove the foundation of what has kept safe and civic society going. So, for example, one of the things that was cut by Elon Musk, from my understanding, was funding to the Congo for Ebola detection. Now, why does that matter? Well, if they don't have the funding to detect Ebola, then it could spread. And so we've been safe and insulated from these things because we've donated money to other countries to help fight and eradicate or at least detect diseases. And now, without that, are they going to have the same means and resources to do so? And if not, is Ebola going to spread? I mean, because it just takes one person to get on a flight. Ebola is pretty contagious, and things can become very crazy. And I worry that we're going to see the result of our aggressive spending cuts come back to bite us, and we'll have an Ebola outbreak, and we won't have the means to coordinate because we've cut off those um, networks. The other thing, and this is going to other cutting that we're doing, is we need to be careful as well because some of this funding can help was helping us to protect the society we had. Now, is it saying that funding should go that way? I mean, maybe there's an argument shouldn't. I'm just saying that it's not all roses, and there has been this whole framework set up that has kept things running the way they are, and we're just coming with a sledgehammer. And one of my examples I'd use is we have a termite problem, and instead of fumigating the house or addressing where the termites are, we're just burning the whole house down, thinking that will solve it, and that isn't solving, of course. The other thing to pay attention to, I know Kash Patel is going to be the FBI director, and he's made indication that he wants to, cut down the civil service department, such as FBI agents, so forth. Again, there could be a risk there because what's keeping us safe from terrorism are the amount of agents we have. Now, there's certainly an argument to made, and I agree with it, that the FBI has some corruption. That we saw this during COVID, where they targeted parents who spoke out against the vaccines. So I'm not saying the FBI is a hallowed institution. I mean, even the inception with J. Edgar Hoover is pretty sketchy. But um, but what I'm getting at is that we have had this institution in place that has kept us safe, and we're now tinkering with that, and we could find ourselves more vulnerable because we don't have the same resources to address terrorism. And I predict, this is my prediction. This isn't from a vision or anything I've seen. This is just from, well, I've had dreams about the end times, but this isn't like this. What I'm saying is not from a dream necessarily. It was the dream's kind of framing how things are, and they're not good, but this is just kind of filling the gaps as to I think how we get there. And I do think that with this, if Cash Patel does what he said he's going to do and really try to gut the FBI, I would expect to see more terrorist attacks because we will not have the resources to address and detect. And I think we have to be also careful when it comes to spending cuts as well and other places because some spending cuts are really going to hurt us. We see that right now with aviation already. Uh, Traffic controllers are underpaid, they're overworked. And if we just go on the spending cut without doing it with a scalpel and being precise, there could be unintended consequences that could really hurt us. And my prediction, again, is I think that's what's going to happen is we're going to go so far and we're going to then be exposed. We're going to have terrorist attacks, things like that. And then people are going to turn against Trump, say they're not safe, and then they're going to go the other way. Whether that happens during Trump or whether that happens after Trump with the JD Vance presidency, I don't know. I don't have that, but that's just kind of my sense as I'm seeing things is we're getting a little too cocky and we just think we're going right back to the golden age and it's just not going to happen. We're not repented, as I've said before, and I've talked about that. And so these are just things to keep in mind to just remind you and remind us, keep in a reminder that as good as things seem, it's just a temporary thing. It's just there to give us some reprieve, but there are going to be consequences if we don't be careful. Because really, what Trump is to give us some pause from what's coming, and it could be also that he was in to show us exactly what's underneath the bed sheets, and it's just cockroaches, and there was no other way, and maybe we just have to take a sledgehammer and expose everything and then bear tight for what follows.